Welcome to Childcare Conversations, the podcast where early childhood leaders like you get real-world strategies, honest talk, and a whole lot of support. Whether you're running one center or many, we're here to help you lead with confidence and clarity. This episode is brought to you by this quarter's sponsor, Playground, the all-in-one childcare management software. We're all about managing monkeys and saving you time at your center. With this platform, you can. We're proud to partner with a team that's as committed to your success as we are. Learn more at tryplayground.com. Now, let's get into today's conversation, one we think you're really going to love.
Hey guys, so we're here to talk to you about what we have learned in our, I don't remember how many thousands of miles we've done so far this year. How many? Kate
this
says
year?
7,000 miles.
No, that was just last month.
Oh, 7,000? Okay. Anyway, what we've learned going to conferences, going to centers, doing executive retreats over the past several months. I'm going to say the spring, summer, fall, and I guess now we're in the beginning of winter in some parts of the country. I'm in Texas. We don't have winter until January, and sometimes not even until February. But I know for some of you, you're already having winter. So we've been hearing a lot, and so we want to talk to you about it.
So one of the things that right now seems to be a huge issue, so in the last few months, has been a lot of people talking about staffing. Where to find them, how to find them, why they don't stick. And they're getting overwhelmed.
Why they're calling out so much. There's a lot about that. In the spring, it was a lot of concern about universal pre-K and what was happening with that and how that was going to affect enrollment. And now it's very much about staff calling out and staff not being motivated.
Well, even finding staff, like we're still hearing folks having a hard time finding staff. And as a result, the directors, y'all, are being totally overwhelmed with all the other things that you're having to do now because you have all their jobs or you're having other staff's jobs that you have to do because those staff are helping pick up other roles.
And so if you're having to cover classrooms or you're having to do tasks that your lead teachers were doing because they could, because they had a well-functioning classroom and they could take on handling the ordering of supplies or stuff like that. When you've got a lot of staff turnover, you've got more work as an admin because people are stressed. They're not able to do all of their normal duties, and you're having to interview, hire, onboard, train, and manage personality conflicts because you've added new persons to your program.
Or maybe you've lost new persons. So I think we heard a lot about that too. So if you're listening and some of this is resonating, it's okay. Basically, we want to make sure you know you're not alone. And I think one of the things that's really important to understand is, Carrie, you've been in childcare for pretty much your entire life, except for 4 years. And did you ever actually have a class on how to manage staff or how to have staff?
I mean, not really. I grew up with my mom running a business, so I learned a lot about what to and what not to do in managing staff by watching my mom, because she had some management experience before I was born, but she had a lot during my growing up years, and I learned a lot from her.
Okay, but you have a degree in early childcare, and in Texas and in a lot of states, that means that you're qualified to be a director. You don't have specific training on how to hire and manage staff?
No, I've paid for many a subscription, many a workshop, many 2-month-long class on this thing or that thing of, Fair Labor Standards Act or whatever federal or state law. I've been on newsletters for the workforce board in my state, the Texas Workforce Commission. So that's for employers so that you're getting educated every month.
Do they have something like that in other states?
Most states have something like that. And there's another one from the federal labor board. So, and every country probably has these as well. So our listeners in Singapore and Germany, these apply other places as well. And it is a shame that I have not been able to find a single college course in any university in the English speaking world on HR in childcare. And if you found one at a university, please send it to me because I want to take that class. But not a single one have I been able to find. And I've looked in multiple countries to try to find a class on managing your staff at the college level, like a college level class on managing your staff in childcare, because we have a unique workforce and we have unique challenges and stresses on our workforce because they're in caregiving roles all the time, just like nurses or doctors or psychologists or, elementary school teachers. But there aren't classes in how to manage that workforce. And it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I think that's really interesting is that as most directors and owners, unless you've got 3 or more locations, you probably haven't hired a designated HR person. And even if you have, do you know that there's actually a society for human resource managers? There's also certifications, entry level and upper level certifications for that industry. So, yes, you can go learn, you can go take courses, workshops, even from HR specific industries. And, in a lot of states, those clock hours actually will work to your benefit. So don't rule them out. But like Carrie said, as an industry, there's things that we just have to think about. One of the things we had a discussion with somebody just the other day related to young folks. So folks maybe under 21 entering into the childcare industry who might have come from maybe even straight from high school or college where they had IEP accommodations and not understanding in management that IEP, school-based accommodations, are not the same as reasonable accommodations in a job setting.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We have more knowledge about how the human brain works today than we had 20 years ago, heck, than we had 2 years ago. And so when somebody's brain works a different way, you can't manage them the same way that you would manage somebody who has a quote unquote typical brain. And there's the whole, if more than
What is
50,
typical anymore?
yeah, if more than 50% of the population has some sort of diagnosis about the way their brain works, then what we call typical is no longer typical. So the neuroatypical is now the typical. But the thing is if somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I have severe anxiety. First, the question is, when do they need to tell you that for you to be able to make a reasonable accommodation? Do they tell you at the time of application? No, they don't need to tell you at the time of application. Do they have to tell you at the time you offer them the job? No, but that is a time that they can tell you and they still have legal protection. Can they tell you at the time of onboarding? That is the ideal time for them to tell you so that both of you have the maximum protection under law, right? Is you've offered a job, they've accepted the job, cool. Now we're doing onboarding and negotiation about salary and hours and stuff like that. And then they say, I have severe anxiety. And because of that, I need these accommodations. Here's what I had in high school, or here's what I had in college. And then the owner or the director or the HR person has to go, okay, I get that. But that was in a building where there were literally hundreds of people available to help you with your needs. And in this situation, the only person who is here to help you with your needs is yourself. And so we have to figure out what is reasonable for our organization to be able to do to support you with your anxiety. So is it that in your classroom, you don't use the overhead lights, you have a lot of lamps. And that helps you with your anxiety because the whining noise of the fluorescent lights is a problem. Or is it
So
that, you're never in, that you're not the opener or the closer because being in a building by yourself makes you really, really anxious.
okay,
That's
so wait,
a
wait, wait.
reasonable
So
accommodation.
that's a great point, but that brings up a question I have. So if you've hired them to be an opener or a closer, or you've hired them to be a lead teacher, I mean, what is your response, especially if they knew this coming into the job application? So as an employer, as a director, if you're listening to this and this has happened to you, now it's different if it's a new diagnosis. So we can talk about that maybe another episode or something. Always hashtag I'm not a lawyer, right? So we are not employment lawyers. So if you ever have a question, make sure you do that. So Carrie, if you have hired them for a specific role and you and I know that best practices in your job descriptions, it says things like must be able to see and hear the kids at all time, must be able to comply with state and federal regulations in this industry. So those are two things that if you don't already have them in all your job descriptions, oh, and lifting children,
Lift
so.
and carrying children of whatever weight it is that you may have to lift and carry children at your.
And I remember at one point in time, because we had somebody who had this issue with their staff, we also, although a lot of states don't require it, we also encouraged at one time folks to even possibly, depending on your program, having people have to have a doctor, not an evaluation that basically they physically and mentally can do the job.
Yeah, healthy enough to work in childcare. Just like you have for the kids, a note from the doctor saying that this child is healthy enough to be in group care, a note from a doctor saying that this employee is healthy enough to be in group care.
Now you can't pick and choose. You have to do that with everybody. So if you decide, and in that particular program, I know that there was some issues with who they could find in the community to hire, like who their hiring base was. And so they were looking at a fair amount of folks who had been retired. And so they were a little concerned. And I went, well, you can add this to your job description and into the hiring requirements, but then you have to do it for that 20-year-old. You can't just make it something that you have the 60-year-old do.
And you can offer to pay for that physical. So you can have a mid-level provider, so a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant who you have a contract with who will do physicals for incoming employees.
Like camp physicals.
Yeah, basically camp physicals. And I think that's helpful. I used that if somebody was out of work for more than 3 days, I wanted them to have a note from a doctor saying they could come back in. And by any time they were out of work for 3 days. So you gave birth to a child, you were out of work for more than 3 days, most people. And then I needed a note from a doctor. You said you had kidney stones and you were out for 3 days. I need a note from a doctor. I'm not going to verify whether or not you had kidney stones. You could have been going to Acapulco for those 3 days. But if you went to Acapulco for 3 days, I now need a doctor's note saying you're healthy enough to come back to work and it laying out what that meant psychologically and physically. So I think that's sometimes helpful. But if we're looking at reasonable accommodations, it has to be something that is reasonable. Like if your playground is completely covered in pea gravel.
Okay, hold on. I'm not sure that did we answer the actual question that I threw at you, which is what happens if you've hired them for a specific role and now they need accommodations outside of that role?
So that's why you have to have that conversation at onboarding. And when you're negotiating their hours and their pay rate and their responsibilities. Because if they're an opener and if they're an opener and they're too anxious to be in the building by themselves, then they cannot be hired for that position.
Okay, so I usually think of onboarding as the onboarding training, but what you're talking about, I think, is more the day you make an offer. Is that okay? All right, I'm just making sure that
it's the first step of onboarding because you're negotiating the agreement of employment. And if they don't tell you
So you're hoping that people are negotiating and not just saying you have the job, right?
Yes, I am. But if you just tell them they have the job and they say great and they don't say anything about the anxiety, you don't have any reason to have to make an accommodation because they didn't tell you nothing. If it's 6 weeks in and then they tell you that they have anxiety and that and you say, "Well, when did you get this anxiety disorder?" and they say 1997, then you say, "I'm sorry, you did not disclose this at the time we were setting this up. And so we're going to need some time to figure out what a reasonable accommodation is. And so if you can't be an opener right now, I'm going to have to hire another one and I'm going to have to put you on temporary leave until we figure it out." And that is a reasonable thing to do, is to put somebody on temporary leave while you figure out how to make a reasonable accommodation.
Now,
A temporary leave does not mean 6 weeks, though. We're talking like a week, and
okay,
you
but
don't
but
have to
here's
pay them during that.
but here's a question. I mean, you hired them. I mean, it's my devil's advocate component here is I hired you for a role and now you're telling me you can't do it. What if I don't need them for the other stuff? Do I have to keep them?
Consult an attorney. My
Okay.
answer would be consult an attorney.
So,
My reading of the law says if they cannot do the job they were hired for and there is not a job with similar skill level in your business, then maybe they cannot work for you. But that's my reading of the law, and I'm not a lawyer. So talk to a lawyer. And that's part of what you can do in that week and say, I need to consult some people about what is a reasonable accommodation. And it can be a lawyer and it can be your state workforce board. Talk to your state labor board, workforce board, whatever it's called in your area, and say, I have this situation. The person was diagnosed almost 30 years ago, and they didn't tell me at the time of hire. At the time we went over the job duties, they didn't tell me for 6 weeks into the job. What do I do now? Get that advice from an outside expert on how to handle it.
absolutely.
I mean, and this is just one element of HR that people are dealing with. And because this is one element of hundreds, Kate and I have done a thing. So we made a masterclass and a mastermind on HR issues. And you can go straight into the mastermind if you want to, which is, a 3-month commitment to work with us at least twice every month, going over your HR issues with other owners and directors across the country. So you can go straight there. Or if you're like, I don't know if I need that, you can come to our mastermind that we've got coming up.
So, yeah.
And
So
either one of those is great.
Yeah, so the mastermind is next Thursday, so it is November 13th. In the show notes is the registration code. You can also go to childcarecoach.org and register for the masterclass that's coming up because we want you to be prepared. It is not your fault. I am sure that all of you have some spooky stories related to HR, right? I mean, we just got through with the holiday season, so you might have some haunting HR stories.
And whether it's that you don't know how to get the right people attracted to your business to hire, if you're having a hard time with teacher burnout, we heard a lot about teacher burnout. We're going to be working on those things a little bit at the masterclass and a lot in the mastermind, reducing teacher burnout and improving the je ne sais quoi, the culture, your school, and making it a place that people really want to come to every day to work with kids, to play with kids, to blow bubbles, and to have a great time.
Well, hopefully you've enjoyed our conversation today. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow, technically, it's next week. So our next episode, Carrie and I are actually going to come back and talk a little bit more about how to mentally prep for that pre-K, universal pre-K, and what you can still do to prep your program in 2026. come back to the next episode and listen to that. Today, like I said, in the show notes is the link for the masterclass. That will be 11/13. And if you got something or you just enjoyed the conversation, share it with somebody else who needs to know. And if you're a director, share it with your owner.
You can also send us a text. Go into your show notes, send us a text. Let us know what problems you're having with staffing, and we'll make sure that we're going to cover at least some of that in that masterclass. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Childcare Conversations.